My next one is actually also an executive. And I think it's gonna surprise you maybe. Jeff Weltman, Orlando Magic president of basketball operations.
I love this. Wait. Was Beal not on your list?
I didn't put him on because I knew you would have him.
Okay.
Magic could have $43 million in cap space if they want to. They have the number 6 and number 11 picks. Not really sure why they would need to make both of those, personally. They already have plenty of young players and 2 that are, potential cornerstones. Extensions on the horizon for Chumo, Kiki, and Cole Anthony. We don't know what they'll do there. And they were 34-win team. Statistically, their expectation was to be a 35-win team, whatever you want to say. They've had a losing record since 2019. So the question really is just how much better do they try to get? Like Zach Lowe last summer was saying on his podcast consistently that there was pressure for those guys to take a step forward. And I think Paolo just looking really good and Franz looking really good ended up being enough, even though they weren't that much more competitive. And Jonathan Isaac still doesn't look like he's probably going to play again. But what does this summer look like with even more sort of resources to pull from to make their team better? How much do they think they need to get better, and what do they do? How aggressively do they try to pursue that? That's what I'm looking at, and I think the answer could literally be anything. They could just hold tight, or they could make a big move.
Should they be in on Beal?
No, I wouldn't be in the business of clogging my cap sheet with somebody like that at the point in time that the Wizards are. If it was a shorter contract, if it was a slightly smaller contract, there are stars I think I might say yes on that too. It's just Beal it's just such a commitment.
Would you have said yes to pursuing Donovan Mitchell last summer?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, last summer we didn't know what Paolo would be, so knowing that he's sort of a building block type of piece, that makes me feel a little better about a superstar trade, and that's why I think this summer is kind of the one to finally do it. But the other part of this is, are you looking at Paolo, Franz, and Wendell Carter as that's our 3 and we're building around that? Or are you looking at those 3 guys as okay, who's going to be the superstar to take them to where they need to go? I think that's an interesting question. It's hard to say because a lot of those guys are so early in their careers. They're different than they're going to be in the future, but that's an interesting question. And I sort of feel like you probably need a player better than those 3.
Yeah, look, you have some interesting other decisions. Markelle Fultz has a non-guarantee on his deal. Gary Harris, who I think they could trade to a team, has a non-guarantee on his deal.
Every good team should be trying to get Gary Harris, by the way.
Yes. Jonathan Isaac, apparel company CEO, author extraordinaire, has a non-guarantee in his salary. And I have no idea what you do with him from a basketball standpoint.
Intellectual is what they call those, Chris. That's what he is. Kind of like Malcolm Gladwell or Jordan Peterson, maybe more of an accurate comparison there. I think that's really where Isaac's headed. I don't know if basketball's in his future, but
yeah, noted conference speaker Jonathan Isaac.
Yeah, just making the rounds, doing getting the speaker fees. They're pretty lucrative. I mean, former presidents like to do the circuit. Jonathan Isaac's just kind of tailing behind them. So what do you think, though? Do you feel like Franz, Paolo, and Wendell is that's going to be the 3 best players when the Magic make their next finals appearance? Or do you think that it's going to be that they flipped some of that into something better and then that guy's going to be what's next? Because they're also, I don't know if you know this, based in Orlando, Florida. So not exactly, place where superstars tend to want to sign on the dotted line.
So they can create some cap space for themselves, and we've talked about this as a name for them before, but I would be chasing a Fred VanVleet in free agency if I can. I think that would be Fultz is good, and I like Fultz, but I think your real point guard is on him. Listen, I also don't think you can rest on Carter, Franz, and Paolo long term being your core best 3. Now, what is the best way for you to upgrade on that? Is it waiting and kind of consolidating things for trades in the future? I think that's probably the more realistic answer. And if you wanted to take a summer to be patient with that and figure out your coaching situation, figure out all the angles of it, I think that's not an unreasonable way for them to do this. But I would be looking, dude, I guess the other question, and maybe we're going to find out this summer, Brendon, is how much do they think they can jump in the East? And like I don't think they're expecting to go from the 13th seed last year, winning 34 games, to like a top 4 seed and like jumping into there. But do they think they can get to 10? Do they think they can get to 8? Like where do they think they can kind of puncture into the East? I think with this talent based on the internal growth,
game would probably be like a reasonable goal.
Yeah, like would that be like the high end of what they could be next year if they make a certain kind of move? I don't think that's unreasonable. It's if you're a Paolo guy and you're a Franz guy, I think in particular, those are the kind of guys that can really drive success for you, I think. So I agree with you. And I think what they decide to prioritize will be interesting. And but I would also, if I'm them, I would try to improve now, but I still think you want to keep some things open for the future and not rush this. I think the worst thing they could do is like go too full bore right now. Yeah. I think you still got to wait a little bit in case there's a bigger move to be made for something at a later down the line when inevitably a superstar does become available, and you can just be like, we have all the picks, we have young talent, and you just go for it.
I just really hope this is the Jalen Suggs year. I've been waiting. I really, really love Jalen Suggs. I think that if he hits and he can just stay healthy, limit his turnovers, play a little bit more of a half-court game, make his threes. Like, it's still there. The way that he started his career hasn't convinced me that he can't become that player, and I think when he's at his best, he's just such an overwhelming physical force on the court. He's an amazing point guard defender. Like, maybe that's just the guy. Maybe that's what they're kind of waiting for at guard. They've drafted or traded for so many young guards. Maybe it's just him. I don't think it's going to be Cole Anthony. I don't think it's going to be Markelle Fultz, but maybe it's just Suggs kind of getting over the hump and becoming that guy that makes it. And really their patience does just pay off. And then he's kind of the fourth part of that core that we're talking about rather than it just being those three guys. Also, Wendell Carter needs to stay healthy. He's never been healthy. Yeah. So it's not even a lock to call him part of that.
Well, look, and maybe another team really likes Suggs and you could cash in on him in that way. I don't think that's like a reasonable way to look at it either. Like, I mean, maybe there's a sign and trade with Toronto to be done. I don't know. I think they have the world is their oyster, you know. Magic Kingdom is there for them to explore if they want to do it.
Well, we know that the Raptors probably don't like Suggs, which is one of the things that always held me back because they did not draft Jalen Suggs when they had the opportunity to do so. They drafted Scottie Barnes. So